So anything that happens in Sri Lanka, nobody in India should look at it as something that our leaders, regardless of what political party, we are a very divided country. We have politicians who hate each other like here probably. But whoever is in office, nobody will do anything that is a threat to India knowingly. With India, I must stress at this point, you saved us last year. Because at that time last year, when we were in crisis, nobody came forward to help us. It was India who came forward. $4 billion last year, that is a lot of money. And it was no questions asked. And then after that, the international community was also slow to step forward. India went out there, Mrs. Sitaraman went out there, Dr. Jayashankar went out there, Mr. Ajit Doval went out there and said, help Sri Lanka.
Milind Moragoda is a Sri Lankan politician, diplomat, and business person. He described the present, recent past, and the future of Sri Lanka in this particular episode. If you're someone who enjoys the geopolitical podcasts of TRS, this is the one for you. I absolutely love bringing on international guests on the show in order to learn more about their mindsets and their cultures, and of course, their countries. If you're a Sri Lankan listener, I hope that I have done justice to your country's story in this particular podcast. I won't elaborate too much more on the episode. I'll let you slip into this geopolitics special of TRS. Milind sir, welcome to India, I guess. At least digital India. How are you, sir?
Okay, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you. It's a privilege to meet you. I've watched several of your programs, and so it's great being here.
No, we are honored. This is the first time we're hosting a Sri Lankan on the show. So I'm going to talk to you very openly about how India feels about Sri Lanka. It could be argued that Sri Lanka is the most geopolitically important part of the world right now, in some ways.
Well, our ego is big, but we wouldn't want to think it's exactly that. But it is an important place. It is it's not recent. I mean, you asked about ancient Sri Lanka. Throughout our history, our leaders, our kings have had to live with this because of the location.
I mean, everything I've learned about geopolitics, I've learned on the show. So I'm relaying whatever my inputs are. And these are definitely from slightly extremist mindsets because they make great podcasts. Okay, so pardon me if I am crossing a line or saying anything wrong with you. That's not my intention. My intention is to learn, especially the Sri Lankan geopolitical narrative. And of course, I have questions about the economic crisis and all that.
Of course.
But I want to begin by asking you if you're aware of how much tension there is between India and China, to the degree where even people who watch the show probably are united by this dislike about China. They might be divided because of religion, belief systems, political affiliations. Everyone dislikes China. That's how much dislike there is for China right now, to the degree where Chinese products are looked down upon, Chinese brands are rejected. And I think the average Indian YouTube podcast consumer is also very aware of the whole Hambantota port situation in Sri Lanka. Long story short, I'm going to give you a short version of what I have learned through YouTube channels like Think School. And then please correct me or give me the Sri Lankan perspective. China is like renowned to give bad loans to countries who are in economic need. Those loans are not easy to pay back. And China's contracts are slightly vague. So eventually what happens is if you can't pay China back, you have to part ways with an asset, which in the case of Sri Lanka and China was that Hambantota port. Now that particular port is extremely important commercially, geopolitically, etc. And there are parts of India and people in India who feel extremely threatened that I believe even a Chinese warship was parked there as recently as last year. So there is this cultural friendliness between India and Sri Lanka. But because of this Chinese existence at that Hambantota port, and there is a Chinese existence within Sri Lanka as well, India is just feeling slightly concerned. Please give me the Sri Lankan narrative, sir. Correct me if I've said something wrong, and I'm very sorry if I've like crossed a line with you.
I'm trying to think how to start the answer because it'll be a long answer, but let me
Take your time.
start it from somewhere. Well, firstly, what I said, I mean, Sri Lanka's location has been always our biggest opportunity and our biggest challenge. Opportunity because if we use it properly, we could have, and we still could become a very fast growing country, and we almost, for us, we can be the gateway into the Indian subcontinent, like what Hong Kong could be to China or the Netherlands is into Europe. It can be the gateway. Equally, yes.
Geopolitically speaking, whoever controls the oceans controls the world in many ways.
One way of looking at it, especially throughout history, it has been that. And Sri Lanka has a very strategic port, which is Trincomalee. Hambantota is not really a strategic port. Trincomalee is where I think, which is the second largest natural harbor in the world. It can bring in any ship that has been built by man. It's a natural blessing that we have.
Where is it?
In the northeast part. It's eastern part of Sri Lanka.
Gotcha.
And it's a beautiful place if you ever visit that. You know, the outer harbor of Trincomalee, there is an a UK, British aircraft carrier, HMS Hermes, which sank during the Second World War. It sank there, and it's right at the bottom, and divers go down there to look at fish. Despite that, you can bring in any ship that has been built even over there. It's so deep, and it's naturally deep. So that is the strategic port. And throughout recent history, there has been always this fear that somebody would get hold of Trincomalee. Both, it could be a threat to the region, but also people are worried globally. Now, for example, we are talking of the geopolitics today. In the 1980s, Sri Lanka was perceived to be, by some in India, being too close to the Americans because our then president was quite close to President Reagan. And because of that, we had a lot of tension with India. It's probably the most difficult period with India that we went through was in the 1980s when this perception was there that India was too close, Sri Lanka rather, was too close to the Americans. Now, today we have a similar situation at times with China because geopolitics change. We cannot, as a small country, control geopolitics because India is a superpower now. US is there as a superpower. China is there, taking superpower in a broader sense. And we can't control that. We have to accept that as it is. But the only policy that we have as Sri Lanka is that we cannot be in any way seen to be a threat to India. Because we are part of, geographically, we are civilizationally the same. Yes, we discussed that. Our blood is the same, we discussed that. But geographically, we are the same. So anything that happens in Sri Lanka, nobody in India should look at it as something that our leaders, regardless of what political party, we are a very divided country, we have politicians who hate each other like here probably. But whoever is in office, nobody will do anything that is a threat to India knowingly. Now the issue is sometimes through commercial transactions and other activities, is it perceived that what we are doing is a threat to India? That's where the quality of the dialogue matters between our leaders, whoever the leaders are. Now, recently, our president was here. He met with Prime Minister Modi. They had lunch alone together, just the two of them, which is, I think, important with leaders. They need to talk to each other. We are diplomats. We are intermediaries. Really, conversations must take place between leaders.
Because the decisions come from there.
They come from there, and opinions are also formed there.
Okay.
So the two leaders met. Dr. Jayashankar and our president had a private dinner together. NSA Doval and the president had private breakfast together so that they could understand each other and to make sure we keep communicating. Because China, there is a Chinese investment in Hambantota. Our perspective is that it is a commercial investment. There are many in Delhi that believe that there is a military dimension.
I think our whole country believes it's a military dimension.
So therefore, we need to see how we can ensure that you don't have that impression. So you mentioned about a ship which came last year. That was a missile tracking vessel. It was not a warship, but it was a missile tracking vessel. But today, technology, there is dual use technology. You can use something to track a missile, or you can use something to track a weather satellite. So this vessel was seen to be by on the Indian side as being something that could be used for either purpose. Now, our people had approved it on the basis of a research vessel because they thought this was a tracking vessel that was used for more, let's say, benign purposes. But there were others who believed that could be used for military purposes. So we had a conversation on that. And in the future also, we will have to have conversations because China is a power that is present in the Indian Ocean. They do send ships across. And so we will have to have a conversation to ensure that India and we are aligned on what is a threat. Because what we have taken the position is what is a threat to India is a threat to us. So then when it comes to the debt issue with China, which you also touched upon, I don't think we have got caught into an Indian debt, the Chinese debt trap at all. I mean, we borrowed from China. We used it for investments in roads, in ports. We used it that way. But we have not, we have to now restructure that debt. And that negotiation is complicated because the Chinese have a different worldview of how the financial system should be run, as opposed to the rest of the world. This is a serious issue because they feel that they would like to redefine some aspects of the international financial system. So they are not accepting the Bretton Woods institutions, like the World Bank and the IMF, the Paris Club, and what, let's say, India would also believe. So that is the issue there, how we renegotiate that debt. That is going on. With India, I must stress at this point, you saved us last year. I mean, that is something I would like your audience. I know it's a younger audience and I want to impress upon.
I also promise you Dr. Jaishankar will be watching this.
Well, I watched his program, so I hope he watches ours. But basically, he played a very important role. Because at that time last year, when we were in crisis, nobody came forward to help us. It was India who came forward. $4 billion last year. That is a lot of money. And it was no questions asked. That's how it happened. And if you had not stepped in at the time, we would have had bloodshed. We were spared bloodshed last year. We had a change in president, but it happened in a peaceful way. And then after that, the international community was also slow to step forward. India went out there. Mrs. Sitaraman went out there. Dr. Jaishankar went out there. Mr. Ajit Doval went out there and said, help Sri Lanka. So on the debt restructuring you referred to, everybody was slow on making a commitment, India gave a letter of financing assurances saying we are willing to take the lead in that. And now, of course, the conversation is going on with the rest of the world and with China also, how to do it. But China has a different way of doing things. So that is the challenge. I mean, that's a challenge for you, that's a challenge for us. So, but on the security side, all I can say is from the point of view of our leaders, regardless of political parties in office, Sri Lanka does not want to be perceived as in any way helping the security, harming the security of India. Because we have an understanding on both sides. I think India also has always looked out for us in the recent past. When we had, even recently, when we had a terrorist bombing, India warned us also in advance when whatever information they had about that. So they have been always very responsive. So in our case, there is no intention here on that. But perceptions are important to clear. I think that's what you are saying.
Yeah. What I will definitely say is I've learned a lot about geopolitics through the show. I learned even more when I actually got to speak to our cabinet ministers. This is the energy I picked up. I might be slightly wrong in saying some of these things, but I feel India is, again, very economically driven. We're a country where in our point in our timeline, we want to make money. We want to build businesses. We want to take India back to being the Sone ki Chidiya, which means the golden sparrow. Okay, we want to become rich again. We don't want no shit with nobody. That's the honest truth. Yes. Like, we don't want fights. Right. But I also know very intensely it's the era of Dr. Jaishankar. So if someone messes with us, we'll mess back. We don't want fights with China, but they seem to be the aggressors right now. where if they line up on our borders in Ladakh, or if they stop their ships in that Hambantota port, I don't think we'll back down either, because that's just the spirit right now of India, which is why these conversations are important. And it's important for me to be very straightforward with you also, sir. Yeah. While I know that the decision makers are in the ministries right now in our two countries, it's important for me as a youth oriented podcaster to ask you these questions and to bring up these topics. And I don't mean to
No,
make
no,
this.
I think that it's important. And one way of getting over this problem is also what we are discussing now. That is how to integrate the Sri Lankan economy better with the Indian economy. Because I think if that happens, this conversation, the geopolitical conversation becomes in a way less relevant. So this time when our president visited here, there was a joint economic vision that was put forward between President Wickremesinghe and Prime Minister Modi. And in that, we talk of integration at different levels. One is connectivity in the context of having a oil pipeline connectivity, electricity cable connectivity, and even prospectively a road connecting India and Sri Lanka. I mean, this is just 50 kilometers or less, I mean, depending how you measure it. It's not a big distance, and it's very shallow as well. And so through that process, then we are talking of ferries, aviation. Then when the two economies get integrated that way, then there is less reason to be insecure. Then we are talking of trade, where we can open out more. We have a free trade agreement, but we are looking at going beyond that. We have also now rupee as a currency, Indian rupee, to be used in trade. And then investments, to have more, bigger investments coming from India to Sri Lanka. And especially now as we restructure our economy, how can we get more Indian companies to come in? Now, if this is done, I think we will be seen to be less remote. Because at the moment, we seem to be still too far away. Although we talk of all the civilizational links and blood links and all that, still it's too far away. Now, you went to Sri Lanka. Did you see any hostility towards the Indians? No,
not at all.
And you felt comfortable?
Loved it.
So that is, so now if we connect more, I have a theory that if we can get more school kids in Sri Lanka to visit India, even whether it's Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, very soon these misunderstandings will go away. Because then geopolitics will be not what we will be talking about. I feel we will then be talking about something else.
I'll tell you, I might be wrong in saying this, but the perception I get is, geopolitically speaking, India looks at Sri Lanka as a brother. But right now, our so-called enemy, China, is just positioning itself near our brother. That's how we're looking at it. And it's happening more and more from a geopolitical spectrum.
No, that is true. I mean, when I mentioned, you see, in the 80s, when this perception was there with the Americans also, because at that time, US and India were not close, we had similar challenges. So we have to, on our side, learn from that. And I think from India's side also learn from it and make sure we don't leave any daylight there. We have to work quickly. And now I see that difference because there is close communication between our leaders. Okay. And that is what is extremely important, because a lot of these things come through misunderstandings.
Wow.
And when you look at now Hambantota Port, for example, originally, Sri Lanka offered it to India to develop. We needed to develop the port. But at that time, there were no real port developers in India who were in a position to do that.
Roughly when was this, sir?
This was in the early 2000s when this was discussed initially. It was offered to India at that time.
Do you know if it was the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government?
No, I think it was probably Congress government at the time, I think.
And they didn't take up the opportunity.
It was more than the government. I think the problem was you did not have strong port developers at the time who could do it at the time. And there was no interest at that time.
I don't know. I mean, I know the entrepreneurial spirit of India. Mukesh Ambani was rich even then.
He was, but I don't think he was doing ports. Now, if you look at it, I mean, take a concrete case of Mr. Adani. He is developing a terminal in Sri Lanka. And he invested last year. When the height of our crisis, when nobody would invest in Sri Lanka, he came and invested. I mean, we are very grateful for him for that because he took that risk. Because if you look at Colombo port, this is something else when it comes to port. Hambantota is not a big port, although there is a strategic issue. I don't deny that. Colombo is our main port, main commercial port. 80% of the business of Colombo port is transshipment business. Of that, around 75% goes to India. So Colombo port is an Indian port, really. I mean, doing business with India. That's the main market. India is the main market. So therefore, because you don't have deep water ports in India, you don't have that many. So Colombo has deep water terminals. So the big ships come there and they unload, and the small ships take the cargo into India. So, and in reverse. So now we are looking at, now with Adani Group investment, we are looking at developing port with India. At that time, there were that kind of private sector presence was not there. This was a more recent part of recent development.
Were you in politics at that time, which you're talking about? Where it was
Yes, I
offered?
was in politics. I can't remember where I was, but I would have been somewhere in politics at that
I'm
time.
sure you were involved in the conversation at least to a degree. Or
Yeah,
at least you
yes.
had a deeper understanding than the average Indian or the average Sri Lankan.
Definitely.
Which is why I want to ask you about that particular loan that Sri Lanka took from China. I believe it was $1 billion loan in order to develop that port. Why did Sri Lanka agree to take that loan from China? Was it because the World Bank was denying?
No, for the port, you see, the south of Sri Lanka is, in Sri Lanka, the two most underdeveloped areas are the north and the south. North is where the Tamil community by and large resides, and that area, there has to be more to be done to develop, and now that the programs for that are going, and that's where the war was. In the deep south is also very poor. So there was a need for a port in the deep south. And every government that was in office would talk about this during elections and was not able to deliver once they were in office. So the president at that time, President Mahinda Rajapaksa, he took a decision that somehow we must try to build a port in the deep south. In fact, he came from Hambantota. That was his hometown. That was his constituency also. So they looked around. Nobody was interested from the private sector side to do it. They looked for financing. They were not able to get it. And finally, yes, because nobody else was available, China gave the financing. Then subsequently, what happened was that after the port was built, there was a line of thinking that we had to reduce our debt, which is correct. I mean, we had too much debt across the board, and so therefore, that's when this debt equity, if you want to call it that, I mean, it was swapped for a loan. A loan was swapped for a lease of the port. That's when it was done to try to improve our situation as far as our economic balance was concerned. So that's how it happened.
Yeah, I'm really happy on a personal level that I get to have a conversation with someone of your stature on my show. Like, it's crazy to think that this is adding to geopolitical narrative somewhat. I know it's going to reach leadership in India.
No, I know your program is watched widely. And
do you think it would reach leadership in Sri Lanka as well?
Possibly. I think definitely we will, of course, inform everybody. And,
Okay.
and you are. I know a lot of young people who watch you, so I'm sure that
In
is
Sri Lanka?
important. Yes, they do.
Okay.
When I mentioned it that I was coming on your program, there was a lot of enthusiasm.
No, I'm glad. We have had Sri Lankan support.
I know you do.
TRS. It's a big reason I've kept the English channel alive. We have a Hindi channel as well.
Right.
It grows much more aggressively because the audience is that much bigger.
Of course.
But Sri Lanka was one of the places in my mind because of which I kept the English channel alive. And
I'm
here
glad.
we are today.
I'm glad.
Again, a sharp question. This is
Sure.
going to be, but I don't know how to not ask you this. The Rajapaksha family right now, geopolitically, it's not got a great name like outside Sri Lanka. At least that's a perception that Indians have. Is it true that the economic crisis was caused because of a bunch of wrong decisions taken by that family and the so-called corruption narratives around that family? Or would you like to draw out a parallel, like opposite opinion? And again, it's a very open-ended question. I'm giving you the narratives I've heard on the show. I might be totally wrong.
It's easy to demonize people in life. It helps you to, position oneself. And my view, that's not the case often. It's
Okay.
easy to say, okay, so and so is the villain, because I think as human beings we prefer that. No, we feel comfortable if we know somebody else is a villain, somebody is a villain, and that's how it works.
Also, in today's day and age, I don't know what to believe on the internet. There's so
Very
much
true,
propaganda
very
flying
true.
around everywhere. I would just like to know your
You
opinion.
see, our case, Sri Lanka, this was a cumulative effect. The economic crisis had nothing to do with one individual or the other. I think every leader since independence, we received our independence in 1948, 1 year after you. And at that time, we had a healthy economy. The British, whatever you may say about them, in the Sri Lankan context, they left a strong balance sheet, if you're talking in private sector terms. We had, during the war, we had provided rubber to the war effort. We had graphite for the war effort. So we had a good set of reserves. We were positioned very well. And Lee Kuan Yew, when he was planning Singapore, visited Sri Lanka and went back, and he said, he wants to make Singapore like Sri Lanka. This was in the 50s. And subsequently, before he died, he mentioned that Singapore should never be like Sri Lanka, that he hoped it would be like Sri Lanka. So you can imagine within his lifetime how his opinion changed. Basically, what happened in my view, and this is my personal view, is that we spent more than we earned, because we had money when we started, and we basically spent on social welfare, on building a huge government service. When the crisis struck, about 80% of our revenues, that is what we earn as a government, was spent on salaries and pensions for government servants. Only 20% was left for everything else. So we had to borrow heavily just to pay for our public service. We have, let's say, 22 million people in Sri Lanka population. About 1.5 million people are working in government, and another 500,000 are earning a pension from government, and we don't have a pension fund. So 2 million people are earning directly from the government. So we just kept spending. As a result, there were good things also that happened to us. We have a very high standard of education. We have very high healthcare, high level of healthcare. Quality of life is very high. And we have a certain amount of infrastructure we have developed. So our people are, basically very competent. And we have a very high quality of life, have a high life expectancy also. But our problem is that we didn't have money to sustain this. So when COVID struck, Ukraine war took place, and also our then president took a decision which I think at that time was probably not the best decision to take. He said he wanted to shift away from chemical fertilizers to organic fertilizers, because he had the right reasons, maybe because a lot of environmental issues were associated with that problem. So the combination of these factors affected our economy. But to blame one family or one individual, it doesn't make. This is a collective decision, and every leader, I think, took decisions at that time. They thought they were the right decisions they took. No leader says, I'm going to take a bad decision, but he's taking a decision in the context of information available to him or her, because we have women leaders on both sides also. But so that was one aspect. The other is our income as a country. Our main source of income is $7.5 billion coming from remittances from Sri Lankans working abroad. That is in the Middle East, in Europe, in East Asia, wherever.
They pour money back into the country.
They pour money. So that is number one, $7.5 billion. Then number two is $5 billion from apparel, garments. We export a lot of garments largely to the United States, about $5 billion. We are very good at what we do there. We manufacture it well. It's high quality garments. For example, Victoria's Secret, for example. A lot of the lingerie is made in Sri Lanka. And that's a high end of that market. Swim costumes, swimming suits. I mean, we have certain niches that we are very, very strong on. Now, there we $5 billion we export, of which 2/3 we import the cloth, and so our value added is about 2 billion. Number 3 has been basically tea. We all talk about tea, but tea is what the British gave us.
Ceylon tea.
Ceylon tea, exactly.
Some of the best tea I've had in my
Exactly.
life.
Now
Anyway,
that is a British legacy. We did not have any tea before the British came. They brought it. They first brought coffee, and then there was a blight which wiped out our coffee. Then they brought tea from China. But we only really export about $2 billion of tea. And a lot of our hill country, you visited some of the hill, we have the tea gardens there. It basically, that's the tea. Then about $1 billion of information technology exports. So that's the lineup. Then we have tourism, which is this wild card. We have never been able to realize the full potential. The highest we earned from tourism was, I think, 2018, about $4 billion. So it was that time, let's say, third place. Then COVID struck and it went like to zero. You know, there was each time we had the Easter bombing, it dropped again. We have never been able to push this up. So these are our sources of income. So our leaders were not able to broaden the sources of income. And so the combination of these factors, we had our limited income sources. We were spending too much on our government and on welfare. That's where we ended up, is where we are today.
Effectively, it's a bunch of not the best business decisions.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I very often tell my business friends, I mean, I come from a private sector background also. If we ran our country the way if we ran a business the way we ran our country, we would have been bankrupt long ago. So that's what countries don't go bankrupt. So, therefore you manage to go through. So now we have an opportunity. That is to say, we hit a crisis. We have now gone to the world. We are restructuring the economy, and I think that is the positive side here. We are looking forward, and of course, this integration with India is what will get our economy moving. Because last year to this year, if you look at the last 2 years, our economy shrank 10% over the last 2 years. Now your economy is going to be growing 6.5%, 7%. So if we are able to hook on to your economy, whether it's tourism, last month, for example, or this year so far, about 20% of tourists are from India. So if we can hook on to tourism, we can do some of the other areas we are talking of, electricity, ports, the port sector, oil. You start integrating in different ways, then we can take off.
Okay. No, I love it. I'm getting to learn so much from you.
More than learning, it's clear.
Yeah, all of it's registered. Like, I'll give you the emotional angle here.
Okay.
It's very cricket oriented.
Right.
We want you to be as good a team as us cricket wise.
Good.
Like if by chance we see Sri Lanka not qualifying for one of the World Cups or one of the trophies, every Indian cricket fan feels like, bhai kya yaar, come na. Like, that's like, it's a way of saying, brother, come on, be with us. So I know that it's very loose to attach cricket to geopolitical scenarios, but that's how Indians feel about Sri Lanka.
I think cricket is life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's a bad thing to attach it that way.
And I know Dr. Jaishankar does the same as well.
I think in your podcast also. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. No, but I love what you said. You basically said that since Sri Lanka gained its independence, there were some wrong structuring decisions at the start, which actually over the years led to this moment now. I definitely know that the fertilizer angle you spoke about was a slightly wrong decision on behalf of the Rajapaksa family. My curiosity is then, why has that family got so much negative PR globally? Like, why have we received the news of like that family having done wrong things? Like, again, I'm just giving you very Indian narrative, sir. Like, for example, I might ask you after this, what do you feel about PM Modi? Because I have a certain opinion as an Indian. I would love to know what a Sri Lankan thinks of PM Modi. In the same way, I'll tell you the opinion that we had of the Rajapaksa family is that I think they're very powerful. It's a family that's controlled politics for a long time. Possibly it's that whole thing about hard times create hard men create soft times create soft men. The world would categorize that family in that bracket of soft men because of what we see on the news about Sri Lanka's economic crisis. And I've gone to Sri Lanka. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And when I'd gone, people were happy, people were radiant, everyone was hopeful, there was positivity in the air. And then on the news, if you see these things about a food shortage, or if I talk to my Sri Lankan friends who talk about economic problems, I really question that, what went so wrong? Like what other decisions were taken like that? So what I've gained from your answer is that you said that it's easy to demonize people in the media because that's human nature. When things are going wrong, you say it's your fault. Like when things are going wrong, especially economically, say in a Sri Lankan's heart, they're feeling almost like they are feeling like a victim. They are a victim. So there has been anger because of that victim feeling, and that anger is directed into the Rajapaksa family. What is the truth about the Rajapaksa family now? What's happening?
If Mahinda Rajapaksa had not been president, probably our war would not have ended. Wherever you may stand on the issue, he was a man who had the courage to say, okay, we have tried enough, now let us end this. And at that time, he was virtually a god in Sri Lanka.
This is 2009?
2009, exactly. Okay, since then, maybe certain bad decisions were made, maybe bad luck also. And today, the society is more divided in Sri Lanka about the Rajapaksas. It is a fact. I think with age, I'm more philosophical on these things. History has to finally judge everybody. It will judge you, it will judge me. So maybe we are too close to the situation now. I mean, I know these people personally. I mean, as I said, I worked with them. I respect them as well. And when I talk like this, there will be many people who will criticize me because it is fashionable. It is fashionable in social media to attack the Rajapaksas today or to attack somebody else.
Yep.
But I'm that's not my nature. I don't think that is correct. I think let history judge who did what. Now the present president is trying very hard to put the country together. He has many critics, large number of critics. And the other day I saw him saying, he doesn't expect to be loved by people. He wants to get his work done. So history will judge all of us, I think. But today's world, people are quick to judge, very quick to judge. And sadly, not quick to change your mind. That's another problem. People judge and then they become, persistent in that.
I think long-form conversations like this can
they help. I know.
Shed some light.
I know. Because my view is, I mean, it's this whole idea of demonizing the Rajapaksas. I don't think there's any benefit from that. Okay, maybe was there too much family in politics? Could be. I mean, that's another question one can discuss. If South Asia has been full of family dynasties, is that a good thing or a bad thing? We can have a conversation on that. I mean, that's one issue. I personally don't believe in family politics. I don't think that is the way to go. But then that's maybe because I'm not from a political family or whatever. But so those are conversations we could have. But I don't believe in demonizing individuals, I think.
Okay. Because this is a solution-oriented podcast, what's the current mindset about the bounce back?
I think, there is optimism. We Sri Lankans are very resilient. I hope it applies to our cricket as well.
Of course.
Yes. And we are going to bounce back, there is no doubt, but it's going to be tough. The next couple of years will be tough. There is no question about it.
Is the biggest asset the Sri Lankans abroad?
It's a mix. There is a problem here. We see people going abroad. There are a lot of people going abroad now. That means we don't have enough people at home, especially skilled people. So we have doctors going abroad because the crisis pushed people out. Engineers, a lot of professionals. So that's an issue. Young people, they prefer to go abroad because they don't have patience now. Because they see on the internet all kinds of opportunities elsewhere, and they say, to hell with it. We are not going to, be here. We get out. So that's going to be the challenge. We need to keep people who can get things done at home. And the remittances from abroad are important for the short term. So we have to ensure that keeps coming. That is bouncing back now. It dropped during COVID. It dropped last year. But now it's bouncing back. Tourism, we have to push. And everybody watching this, if they all visit, I think everybody watching our podcast, if they visit Sri Lanka, we are okay.
I would love to be a part of that change because I genuinely love your country. Like, I feel every place you visit leaves you with something. what I was left with from Sri Lanka was a lot of friendliness and a lot of peace. That's at least the experience I had. And there's way too much natural beauty in Sri Lanka for people not to see it once in their life. There's too much natural beauty. Like, it is a very blessed land, but you need to actually see it from your own eyes to understand it. And also, the brown person in me just loves all the brown people around. Because when you're surrounded by white people or Asian people, you're just feeling a little bit out of place. A little bit. Like, not that there's anything wrong with them, but it's always nicer to have brown people around. So
it is, I think, from what I can see now, a lot of people like to go to Goa. It is in Delhi. I don't know about Mumbai. And Colombo is not that far away. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't go to Goa, but Colombo can be the place to go. And then we are now trying to develop the gaming industry also. There will be a fairly, I think, a world-class casino coming up soon. By next year, it will be in place. So that's something else that is interesting. I don't gamble, but I know there are many people who enjoy gaming. So that will be another aspect. So I think we can, that's part of our bounce back. Tourism will be the quick win for us if we can make it happen. On the apparel side, there is a challenge because already our garment exports have dropped about 20% because the US market, there is a slowdown there. And they are not ordering their inventory. They have too much inventory. So I think it will take a little while for them to catch up. So this year, it doesn't look good for the apparel industry, the garment industry.
Okay. So it's primarily tourism, the Sri Lankans abroad, a bit of the garment industry, but again, that's a volatile market. It could.
Exactly. And IT is another important, I said we had about $1 billion worth, and you have some of our big companies there. HCL has invested there. I think Tata is looking at it as well. That's a sector, but that relies on human resources. So if we have a lot of our young people getting out of the country, then, that's a challenge. So we have to work on that. Okay. But your companies are very responsible that way. They actually pay for training in the IT sector when they come there. I notice HCL does that. They give scholarships for young people to go to study and then come back and join. So I would hope that more IT companies from here would go out there.
Could you draw out a picture of the peak week of the economic crisis? Like, what was happening in the life of an average Sri Lankan versus what is happening today? Like now, if I go there this week, I'm sure it's different scenarios. So what was happening?
I think the major sort of the blow up came over when we ran out of foreign exchange and we were having a problem importing oil, petroleum and gas. And especially in the urban areas, gas is important for cooking. So therefore, people who are living in apartments, they couldn't get their gas. So some of them just came out and went out to demonstrate. They said, this government must go. They can't even keep us, we can't work in our kitchens. Then, of course, there were long lines for petrol. So transport became a problem. And if India had not stepped in, because I keep repeating this because it should not be underestimated, the role that you played. India had not stepped in, and Indian Oil, you distribute petroleum in Sri Lanka, you were able to bring petrol in and provide that to the market. It would have been worse. But what we had were queues, long queues, people sometimes maybe 2-3 days to get their cars pumped with petrol. So that was one scenario. Then we have, like in India, we have a division, urban, rural. So in the rural areas, of course, this fertilizer decision did have an impact. The farmers were not getting their crops. They couldn't also get fertilizer. They were not able to get their insecticides, for example. So there was a crisis there for the crop. So the worst days were that. And then today, there is no scarcity of petroleum is available. Most imports are available, and slowly the government is opening out the economy. But of course, the challenge is the cost of living has gone. Inflation is being managed, but because we have no economic growth, there is basically income sources are less now. So people's incomes are not enough to be able to buy food they can buy, but their quality of life has become an issue. So today you have a situation where people who are middle class are suffering a lot. The poor, as you know, always suffer. They bear the brunt of the burden of any economic crisis. But here the middle classes have also got pushed down, so people are finding it difficult to afford day-to-day requirements. And that is a problem at the moment. But goods are available. So if you have money, you can buy what you want. Earlier, even if you had money, you couldn't buy what you wanted. So that's a major difference. We have some issues in the health sector. We are trying to get medicine, import of medicines. Money is available, but we have to streamline that, because India has also given some credit for medicines as well.
Yeah, I don't know why I feel like saying this, but maybe an entrepreneurial way of looking at this is remote work culture, like working for foreign companies. I think that if one is in any form of a crisis, one should look at their own unfair advantages. At least from my little understanding of Sri Lanka, and this is based on the fact that I've been there, most of the Lankans I met can speak English, which is honestly a big advantage in terms of getting a job from abroad while working in Sri Lanka. So be it coding, be it even like creative jobs like editing, media related, etc. And the other big advantage, at least I see that Sri Lankans have, is at your core, you all seem like team players. Like whenever I speak to a Lankan guy, and I have Lankan friends, there's a lot of team player energy, which also shows up in sport, etc. So, I mean, that's what I would nudge Sri Lankan youth towards, but who am I to say anything? I've not lived in your shoes, so I can't imagine what you guys are going through, but subscribe to Beer Biceps for more. No, I'm kidding.
No, they should, I think. But it's an interesting point about team players. I find our people are individualists more than team players.
Really?
Yeah, we tend to be.
Really?
We are very bright, very quick, but we are too individual. But when there is a crisis, interestingly, we tend to mobilize. We do that. And that's where, I mean, that's the contradiction here. Day to day, we want to do things on our own the way we want to do them, and we don't want to work together, or we want to compete with each other.
Really?
But if there's a real crisis, we come together. I think in Sri Lanka last year, you saw a few moments where people came together and said, let's forget about our religions, let's forget about our ethnicity, let's get the job done. Now, whether that spirit, you see it in cricket also, again, when Sri Lankans, we all support, regardless of our views, we support the cricket team. And in sport in general, Sri Lankans are like that. They support whatever Sri Lankan teams they support. But then again, we go back to old habits. So maybe we have to get
Break the
that,
pattern?
Find a way of making it work.
Okay. What's your perception of the average Indian person, the human? Are we any different?
I mean, from my experience, I find Indians, I'm very comfortable in India. My wife is very comfortable in India. And Indians are friendly, Indians are caring. Everything I have to say about Indians would be very positive. And we are, as I said, we are the same blood. But of course, you have different politics, you have different views. It's a huge country. But what I find also interesting is each state you visit, you have a totally different cultural context. It's quite remarkable. And we've traveled from Meghalaya to Tamil Nadu. It's each an experience, and the civilizational experience also, because you have different histories. All what I have seen about India has been positive and Indians.
It's a bunch of micro countries stitched together.
But it works. Normally it's not easy to stitch India together. It's an idea that is there that hold all of you together. And it's remarkable. You as a nation, you hold together. When you look at it, if somebody wrote it separately, you wouldn't think that it is possible. The fact that you have so many diverse nationalities in the sense of ethnicities, religions, cultures, but it works.
What's your favorite Indian food?
Many. That's too much too. I mean,
if you had to pick,
if it's that's a good question. I think in Delhi, I would say the Dampak restaurant there in the ITC has a morel mushroom biryani.
right.
I don't know whether you have tried that.
I know what you're talking about.
That would be one such favorite
Wow,
food.
you've named a specific dish from a specific
you asked
restaurant.
me what is what is your favorite. Just when I was trying to visualize immediately, a lot of ideas came to my mind, but that one, so
Sure.
that was the moment.
Sri Lankan food is similar to Chettinad food, like for me.
Chettinad and Kerala also.
Yeah.
Kerala, it's a mix. It's hot like Chettinad food, I think, and yes, it's a mix.
Okay.
We have our own identity also, but it's a mix of these two together. I like Chettinad food also, obviously. Kerala food.
I
like
love Sri Lankan food. Like there's actually a couple of Sri Lankan restaurants I keep ordering from. So a lot of kotu roti, coconut based curries. It's like exactly my
we
palate.
use a lot of coconut. I mean, for us, I think they say that to the American Indian, the Red Indian, the bison, they said represented everything. For us, it's a coconut tree because we eat every aspect of it. We use the shell as a utensil. The trunk is used for building rafters for roofs. The leaves are used for roofing as well. And then for decorative purposes, we use the flower. I mean, every aspect. And then we make alcohol from coconut as well. So everything is coconut.
No, I got to talk about this a little bit. I'll give you a very Indian perspective on Sri Lanka. When I was traveling there, one of my first thoughts was so scenic, and it's almost like someone's kind of created this sibling of Kerala. You feel a lot of parallels between the two, be it landscape, be it culture, but you guys are a very different culture also. There's some very specific things. And again, the Sri Lankans I met were extremely friendly, extremely gorgeous. I have to say that also. But the guys I met were extremely friendly. You feel very comfortable there. Which is why, at the start of this conversation, so you were constantly in our chatter, you were constantly bringing up like a slightly violent past. You kept saying that, which as a tourist, I can't visualize. Like, even so, look at you, like you're so friendly, like, your energy is so positive, radiant. It's in many ways the land of the Buddha in the modern world. So I don't get that violence angle. And again, my assumption is that this is all political propaganda fueling sides against each other.
I think you are right. I mean, first you mentioned about Kerala. Actually, if you close your eyes in the south of Sri Lanka, when you go to, let's say, Cochin, and you open your eyes just on the street, you wouldn't see a difference, because you are quite right. I mean, our food is very similar. The way we dress our elephants, the roofs of the temples, the Kerala temples are similar as well, and we have had that connection, I think. And then we have even the drumming. Keralites have a very sophisticated history of drumming as well. That's a good comparison. But of course, we clearly have our unique identity, and that's something we are proud of, and the civilizational identity as well. The violence is something I also wonder about. I mean, why it has happened, because our post-independence history has been violent. There is no doubt. 30 years after the 75 years of independence, 30 years we went through this war. We have had other insurrections also that are very violent. More recently, this Easter bombing that took place. Why is it in this small island that we are capable of such violence? Politics has a lot to do with it. I think you're quite right. Again, and irresponsible politics. And we need to rethink that. But then we also, as people, must reflect, because finally we are a democracy. Since 1931, we have elected our leaders. Men and women in Sri Lanka since 1931, even under British rule, we have elected our leaders. So we need to, I think, reflect on it. I mean, what have we done right and what have we done wrong? And then find a solution, because for a way forward, we really need to understand that. Why is it that we suddenly explode like that? And then and politicians, definitely, everywhere in the world they use extremism, as we discussed earlier, because it is convenient. But I think we as citizens need to be more responsible as well, I think, and reflect on it. And maybe what happened last year is an important moment. There is a lot of discussion going on in our society about it. I hope the outcome is positive, because sometimes it can lead to other conclusions, and I hope we don't go there. So I think the next election, we will have another election in about a year's time. I mean, I found this, being a democracy, you can have elections at any point, but at least at the moment, I think the thinking is in about another year's time. And I hope people will look at the situation more responsibly. Let's see.
Yeah. Is your country entrepreneurial?
Mixed. We have, you see, our private sector, parts of it have been insulated, protected. And then even that's why when you open out with the Indian market, some people are frightened because they think they cannot compete because there are too much imports coming in. I think we need to create that culture of entrepreneurship more. Especially the majority Sinhala community needs to be more entrepreneurial. I think this is a personal view that I'm putting forward. I think we need to do that. And I think the youth think in an entrepreneurial way. I also think the fact that so many people have left Sri Lanka and are doing well is an indication that obviously if they can do well abroad, they should be able to do well at home. But I think we need to catalyze more entrepreneurship. Now, what I notice, what is happening in places like Bangalore, where you have incubators and you have, this government, I think our successive governments in Sri Lanka have basically tried to tell people, don't worry, we look after everything. We look after you from cradle to grave. And that's what crashed our economy also, because we were trying to do that. We give you everything free, because we have free healthcare, we have free education all the way through university. These are good things if, you're able to afford them. Then we have a large welfare program. And that has, I think, made people too dependent on government. And that entrepreneurial spirit has, I think, got, in some ways, it has been pulled out. So we need to push that. And maybe this crisis is the opportunity for that. Yeah. Because I think by and large, Sri Lankans do well when they go abroad. That's the question we must, ask. How is it that they are doing so well there and we are not doing too well as a country?
Yeah. Again, as they say, tough times build tough people. So I anticipate that we're going to see a whole new tough generation that's come out of this crisis and this phase.
One hopes, and that's what we should, I think, push for.
So Milind sir, that was the podcast for today. I know there was some intense questioning, but I represent like the Indian youth in many ways. And my intention was to just bring out the truth. Because I feel that people have opinions about Sri Lanka, especially in the last 1 or 2 years, where India has become geopolitically very active. Like the average person knows about geopolitics. So rather than us just forming opinions, I would actually learn from a Sri Lankan like yourself, especially someone as knowledgeable as you. So sorry if I crossed any line with you.
No, you didn't at all. Yeah. You didn't at all.
My intention is dual. One, to definitely reach out to Sri Lankans through this podcast, because maybe I feel a sense of friendship or brotherhood because I've been there. And, as India does with Sri Lanka, you guys are our brothers. Like there is the same blood flowing through our veins. So that is one definite intention. But secondly, it was to educate people about Sri Lanka, especially Indians. I feel our countries need to come together more, be it in terms of hard power or soft power. So all the questions and everything I put you through in this episode came from that place. So thank you for taking it head on. Like you answered like so much. People don't open up the way you do. It makes me respect Sri Lankans even more. You're just another great Sri Lankan I've met. Shout out to my boy Dasun.
But I hope you visit soon. That's part of the
it's my promise
agenda here. Conspiracy is to get you to come back soon.
It's my promise to visit soon, sir. There's a lot of intermingled culture that I hope to explore. As you can see, there's a lot of Buddha elements in our office as well. So I will visit. Hopefully I'll bring Palgar Rinpoche, my mentor, with me as well.
Yes, that will be great.
I bow down to you, sir.
Thank you very much
trust
for
me,
the opportunity.
Yes, I just feel a lot of brotherhood towards all of Sri Lanka. And I just hope we hosted you well on today's episode.
You did very much, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Oh.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, sir. Just
Thank
meant
you.
a lot that you came home.
And thank you for your team as well,
Yes.
everybody here.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. That was the episode for today. I'd love to know what you guys thought of today's episode because it is slightly experimental for us. I'm very open to doing more geopolitical chats like this with people who aren't Indian. We've already done so many geopolitics specials with Indian citizens, but it's about time that we bring on citizens from other countries as well. If you're a new listener, especially if you're a Sri Lankan listener, please go and check out the massive library of episodes that we've already created on TRS for the regular TRS listeners. Keep supporting us because Ranveer and the team will be back soon. Make sure you support Milinda, sir. I've linked all his handles down below. Lots of love to you guys. I hope you enjoyed today's episode.